Borderlands opened to barely 8 million at the domestic box office, and failed to crack 10 million worldwide in its opening weekend, which, given its $120 million budget excluding marketing, makes it the greatest flop and money loser of the year so far. But just like last year's The Marvels, this presents Hollywood with a problem, because how are they going to spin another female-centric adaptation of a male-driven property flopping this badly, without pointing out the obvious? Let's find out. This video is sponsored by Epoch Studios. Whenever a would-be blockbuster fails in a sufficiently spectacular manner, the industry trades and adjacent blogs are required to do a forensic on why, but as we've seen from last year's The Marvels and onwards, they tend to do so without pointing out the real reason, as that is something of a golden calf for them, and admitting how wrong they were is just too painful. Which means they'll be scrambling for all other possible explanations, no matter how far-fetched or ridiculous they may be. Now, I already did my own postmortem where I went through the real reason why the audience took one look at the poster and trailers and decided to sit this movie out weeks before it was released. But since Hollywood isn't willing to admit the truth of the situation just yet, let's see which rationalizations they will come up with to deflect from what actually happened. SlashFilm begins their postmortem titled 5 Reasons Why Borderlands Became the Bomb of the Year at the Box Office by saying, fans have been waiting an awfully long time for the Borderlands movie to arrive, as the big screen adaptation of the Gearbox software favorite has been in the works for literally years now. The movie finally premiered on the big screen over the weekend. To say that it was an unceremonious debut would be the understatement of the year. Director Eli Roth's take on the video game franchise is nothing shy of a disaster, ranking as the biggest bomb of 2024 so far. And all of that is SlashFilm being honest, at least up until this point, and they even doubled down, saying, Borderlands is now easily the biggest bomb of the year to date, and even above the mess that was Sony's Madam Webb. It's early days, but this may end up being one of the biggest flops of all time given its current trajectory. So, what went wrong here? How did Lionsgate let this happen? How did seemingly everything go wrong on a project that had so much going for it on paper? And right there is the first sign that we're reading a spin piece, because it never had so much going for it on paper. On the contrary, the paper may as well have stated destined to flop, which it was. So let's get into their 5 rationalizations, while I point out the flaw in each and every one of them. Number 1. Borderlands failed to impress critics or audiences. SlashFilm writes, this is the biggest elephant in the room, and it's the one that needs to be addressed before talking about anything else regarding Borderlands and its lousy performance. No, there is an even bigger elephant in the room, and I'll get back to what that is, but let's hear SlashFilm out first. They say, as of this writing, Roth's film has a downright terrible 9% approval rating from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, making it one of the worst reviewed studio films of the year. It also earned a truly lousy D+ cinema score, which is almost unheard of for a blockbuster of this size. Now, to be clear, I'm not disputing that the absolutely brutal reviews served to reduce the opening weekend box office dramatically, but let's look at the Thursday preview numbers. A movie like this should easily clear 8 million in Thursday previews alone, but Borderlands only did 1 million, and that's less than 24 hours after the negative reviews first hit. So if we go by 8 million as an average here, Are we suggesting that 87.5% of the hardcore genre film audience over the course of one day changed their mind about going, just because the exact same critics who couldn't praise The Acolyte and The Rings of Power enough suddenly didn't like this movie? Now that does not compute. Instead, I submit to you that those 87.5% who normally would have gone to Thursday previews but didn't this time, made the decision to sit this movie out weeks ago, and the reviews only validated the decision they already had made. Now, over the course of the opening weekend as a whole, many casual moviegoers would have been scared off by the negative reviews, but the built-in audience decided against going long before there were any reviews. The next reason why the movie flopped, as per SlashFilm, is that Borderlands was a big mess behind the scenes. They then go through some of that, and keep in mind, as I broke down already, principal photography concluded 3 years ago. Could that have scared so many that the movie only opened to 8 million over the course of its entire opening weekend? Nice excuse, but heck no. This movie had production trouble to be sure, but not of the widely publicized fantastic kind. On the contrary, as far as troubled productions go, this was fairly under the radar, and it never got much genre press, let alone mainstream attention, so this would never have scared off the audience in any numbers that can explain what we're seeing here. SlashFilm's next reason is that Borderlands faced unexpectedly stiff competition, which sounds like a nice excuse, but it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. You could make that argument if the movie had opened on the same day as Deadpool and Wolverine or Twisters, but the fact of the matter is that Deadpool and Wolverine has been out for 3 weeks now, while Twisters has been out for a month and is already out on digital, and it still pulled in almost twice as much as Borderlands. On top of that, it ends with Us, a counter-programming chick flick, opened to 50 million, so clearly the audience was out in force. It's just that they all collectively decided, long before it was released, to sit out Borderlands. Next, SlashFilm blames the marketing, saying Lionsgate was conservative with its marketing spend. Now, I am the first to admit that traditionally, Lionsgate has the worst marketing department in town. You know, Dredd, the Judge Dredd reboot, everyone is blown away by when they eventually see it, and then regret not seeing it in theaters and now want a sequel to? Yeah, well, it had the worst marketing campaign of all time, and that is 100% on Lionsgate. But in this case, I think they were smart enough to realize that they were sitting on a bomb, and that every dollar they spent on marketing Borderlands was a dollar they'd never see again, so they probably only spent some contractual minimum amount, and good for them. SlashFilm writes, Lionsgate was pretty conservative with the marketing spend for Borderlands, relatively speaking. According to Variety, the studio spent about $30 million on marketing and distribution. For a movie with a $115 million budget, that's certainly on the low end. That was the right call though, because now, having seen the movie for myself, there was nothing to sell here. There was nothing they could market. Lionsgate marketing did as good as anyone could have with the movie they had, which was literally unsellable. I mean, what could they have done differently? Focused more on the robot voiced by Jack Black? Because that was particularly bad. Or should they have lied, tried to pretend that the movie was something that it isn't? No, good on them for mitigating the losses. And then comes SlashFilm's final excuse, which is a pure cop-out. Video game adaptations are still tough to crack. And that's their excuse. A few months after Amazon Prime had one of their biggest hits of all time with Fallout. And a few months before, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is likely to be an as big a hit as the previous two. And 1 year after both Super Mario and Five Nights at Freddy's were monster hits for Universal. Video game adaptations are no tougher nuts to crack than anything else. You just need the right vision and the right people to oversee and execute it. And that's what this movie lacked. because the creative team in charge of Borderlands made a movie that is a nigh-on unwatchable disaster, which is so bad that no one should be watching it. But on that note, and before I point out the real elephant in the room here, which SlashFilm missed, and there's a kicker here that you don't want to miss out on either, let me take a moment to recommend another movie that you should go see, and that would be The Fighting Squad from Epoch Studios. The Fighting Squad is a powerful true story of Christians who, in the face of death in a third world prison, transform the entire camp through their unshakable faith. This film is not just entertainment, it's a profound witness to the strength of faith and the potential for redemption. The film stars James Paddington, Kevin Sorbo, Cuba Gooding Jr. and Madeline Anderson, and it's out now, but in limited release only. For watch times and the theater closest to you, see the link in the description below and go check it out. With that said, let's reiterate the main thesis from my postmortem on why Borderlands failed, which is that audiences took one look at the poster and trailers, which do fairly represent the final movie, and decided to sit out this obvious disaster starring one girl boss and two granny bosses. That's it. That's the whole reason right there. The built-in male audience have had enough of male-driven franchises being subverted in the retelling and made female-centric, so that female viewers may see themselves represented on screen, which is something Hollywood did without the female viewers ever having asked for it. You know what the female viewers did ask for though? Chick flicks, like It Ends With Us, a movie that opened to 50 million in the same time frame that Borderlands barely cracked 8 million. And it gets even better, because the kicker here is that despite Borderlands being so female-centric that women of literally all ages would see themselves represented on screen, and thus presumably flock to see it in theaters, a mere 34% of the opening weekend audience for Borderlands were women. That means that despite all the effort and all the compromises the movie did to win over the female audience, less than 3 million of Borderlands' opening weekend box office represented women. Let me say that again, and even more accurately. Despite compromising the entire movie in the name of increasing female appeal and viewership, women only made up 2.9 million of Borderlands' opening weekend box office. By contrast, the audience for It Ends With Us was comprised of 84% female viewers, translating to 42 million. That is the real lesson Hollywood should take away from this. Forced diversity in the name of expanding the audience is a recipe for disaster. Do you think Hollywood will learn this time, or are a few more bombs like these necessary for the message to go through? Let me know in the comments, and remember to find watch times for The Fighting Squad in the link in the description below.